Good morning. It is Thursday, y'all, the 5th of December, 2024. I hope you have had a good week so far. I hope you're able to be in a Bible believing, preaching church last night. And just remember, it's so important when I stress that you need to be in a Bible believing, preaching, teaching church. I believe they should be preaching the whole counsel of God. I believe that they should be saying, Thus saith the word of God, thus saith the Lord, not thus saith the Greek or the Hebrew, or I feel like, or you should feel like, or something like that. We should be preaching fact and faith, faith and fact. That's what we should be preaching and teaching. And that's what we get by preaching and teaching the word of God. So I just want to say something here. There are some that watch this video that might believe in the tongues and the healing and the wonders and things, the miracles that accompanied early church ministry. I'm not saying that there's not still miraculous healing out there and things like that, but I am saying that they had a point and they had a purpose, and those point and purposes are no longer needed because of the fact that we are to believe by faith. Faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. That's Romans chapter 10. I encourage you to read Romans chapter 10. It's very important. Good morning, Fernando. Good morning, Steve. It's good to see you all this morning. So we need to rely on faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and evidence of things not seen. And when we get into these signs that we're going to look at the signs of the apostles, we're looking at things that we can see and not things that we believe by faith. And that's opposite of what we are supposed to do. But brothers and sisters, let me tell you something. This whole movement, this charismatic movement that's out there, it started about the same time the modern version Bible issue started popping up, where we started getting all these different versions of the Bible. That was in 1882. Shortly after that is when you started getting all these false teachings. You get a Jehovah's Witnesses, you get the faith healing and all this other stuff, and the signs and all this. And then you get into the mid 1900s, and they kick prayer and Bibles out of school, and then they take the Ten Commandments down out of the courtrooms. So when you start messing with the Word of God, you start messing with God Himself, and He'll start taking His hand away from you. That's just a fact. There's a Bible verse that talks about God's going to send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread and water, but of hearing the word of God. They shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. So, what is happening is people are being turned away and turning themselves away from sound Bible teaching. That's why First Timothy says, Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. People aren't studying their Bible like they should, the whole Bible, and putting this puzzle together. They're taking cherry picking pieces here and there to fit their preconceived ideas without looking at the whole context of the passage. Case in point, yesterday, where we looked at, what is it? What verse? What is that yesterday? Verse 21, 1 Corinthians 14:21. It says, In the law it is written, with men of other tongues and other lips will I speak unto this people. And what is he talking about? He's talking about the nation of Israel. This was a prophecy from the book of Isaiah. And this is a prophecy of Israel, and they're turning away from God, and that he's going to move to another people. But he's saying this, it was written in the law. Okay? So this was something written to the Jews. So we put this in context. With men of other tongues and other lips will I speak unto this people, and yet for all they will not hear me, saith the Lord. Wherefore tongues are for a sign, not to them that believe, but them that believe not. So when we get to the whole thing about tongues, it is a sign. And it is a sign for the nation of Israel. Like I wrapped it up yesterday, there were unbelieving Jews present in Corinth. That's why they were able to speak in tongues. But you know what happened with the Corinthian church? They got carried away with this. Instead of focusing more on the edifying and the building up and the equipping, They focused selfishly on look at me. What can I do? That's why Paul spent 1 Corinthians chapter 12 talking about the unity of the body. So you get caught up in these little things, you're babies. You can't grow. That's why he said in verse 20, be not children in understanding. He wants you to be grown. He wants you to be adults. He wants you to be able to take on the meatier things of the word. But if you're stuck on the little things, the basic things, the things that don't mean much, you're never going to grow. And that's why they were called carnal Corinthians. He called them baby Christians because they wouldn't grow. The same way with churches throughout the world today, you have a bunch of baby Christians that can't grow. One, because they don't have ears to hear the truth. Two, they're going to churches where they're not being preached and they're not being really fed. They're taught just basic stuff, not the deeper things of God. And you need to know that as we are getting closer to the rapture, the more this world is being blinded and Christianity is being blinded. We are in the Laodicean church age. We're at the tail end of it. And in that Laodicean church age, it doesn't end well. The rapture happens, the tribulation starts. And I'm concerned, folks, there's going to be a lot of people in churches today that will get left behind. And I'm talking about so-called Christian churches that they're going to get left behind because they're caught up in a tickle your ear, feel good message. And they don't truly get saved, born again. And if they do get saved and born again, they stay baby Christians, and then they can't effectively lead other people to Christ, which is what we are supposed to do. We're supposed to lead other people to Christ. But as for the verse 22, wherefore tongues are for a sign, not to them to believe, but them that believe not. Let's look at something here. These signs, these are called apostolic signs. That's why you get into charismatic churches today. You have a lot of apostolic churches today. But they're not understanding that the apostolic movement was for a limited time. This apostolic signs, these were called signs of the apostles. Go with me, if you would, 2 Corinthians chapter 12. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. I told you yesterday we're going to bounce around. Today we're going to do it. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. And look over here, verses 11 and 12. I am become, 2 Corinthians 12, verses 11 and 12. I am become a fool in glorying. Ye have compelled me, for I ought to have been commended of you, for in nothing am I behind the very chiefest of apostles, or chiefest apostles, though I be nothing. Truly, the signs of the apostles were wrought among you in all patience, in signs and wonders and mighty deeds. You had a time period where there are signs of the apostles being given. And anytime you see the signs of the apostles, there were unbelieving Jews present. Go to Acts chapter 2, verse 43. We'll read a little bit more. We've read this passage, but to put this in context, Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2. Look at verse 43. And fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done by the apostles. Go to Acts chapter 5. Acts chapter 5. Acts chapter 5, verse 12. Acts chapter 5, verse 12. And by the hands of the apostles were many signs and wonders wrought among the people. And they were all with one accord in Solomon's porch. Acts chapter 1 through 7, it's talking Jews to Jews and Jewish proselytes. We're talking saved Jews, the apostles, and their disciples, preaching and teaching and talking to Jews, unbelieving Jews, and unbelieving Jewish proselytes. So clearly, we need to understand the difference that signs They served a purpose, but those signs were for the unbelieving Jew. Now, from Acts chapter 8 on, God is turning his attention to the Gentiles. But Paul would still go and preach in a synagogue up to a certain point, simply because he wanted his brethren, the Jews, the brethren, to get saved. But God finally had to show him, we're done with them. We're moving on. And that is why when we get I said before, looking at a difference between Romans 12 and 1 Corinthians 12, when it talks about the gifts of the Spirit, there is a difference between the two. There are two gifts missing in Romans chapter 12 that were still present in 1 Corinthians 12. Those were tongues and healing. They were no longer in that list of the gifts of the Spirit in Romans chapter 12. Why? Because God was fully turning his attention now to the Gentiles. Paul is in prison in the Gentile world epicenter where everything was going out from Rome. So there was not a need anymore for the miracles because God was turning to the Gentiles. And the Gentiles were to believe by faith, believing in something they could not see. Now we'll try to wrap up the rest of 1 Corinthians chapter 12 over the next several days, between Monday and Tuesday. I don't want this to be like some kind of criticism on the charismatic movement. I want this to be a truthful, heartfelt understanding of what tongues were for, and that they're no longer needed as far as the way that it was in 1 Corinthians 14. We do have tongues out there now. There are other languages. And that's why a lot of people learn, they're bilingual. They learn a couple different languages to be able to communicate. All right, that's all I got for you today. I hope you have a good day. God bless y'all. And I'll talk to you tomorrow, Lord willing.